A few years ago, when I was around 20 or 21, I worked at a ski resort. During my 2-year tenure there, I took on a variety of tasks before setting my sights on full-time, year-round employment. This narrowed my options down to one role, janitor. I was actually okay with that. I'd seen the cleaning crew, mostly people around my age, jamming out to music on their headphones while they worked. The idea of listening to music all day while getting the job done appealed to me. Plus, it came with a small raise. After a quick interview with the manager, Gary, I was hired on the spot. However, my first day brought a surprise. Gary had been caught drinking on the job and was involved in some sexual assault allegations, so he was let go. For a few months, we were without a manager, but the most senior worker, a nice older Hispanic lady, kept things running smoothly. She wasn't promoted to manager because of her limited English, which seemed unfair. It was at this job that I met Jared, who quickly became my best friend. Eventually, they brought in a new manager named Fabi, who was hired for her experience and bilingual abilities. Jared and I made up the night crew, while Fabi and the rest of the staff, all middle-aged women, worked the day shift. Our schedules would overlap for a few hours, especially during the resort's frequent events, like weddings that would last until midnight or later. Jared and I faced some challenges, particularly with cleaning duties during these events. We were the only ones willing to work late, which meant tackling the women's restroom restock and cleanup. This was tricky because the restrooms were designed with individual rooms, making it hard to know when they were empty. We couldn't close them off completely, and the signs we put up indicating male workers were cleaning were often ignored, leading to several awkward encounters. One incident involved a drunk woman who tried to grope Jared. We reported it to Fabi, but she dismissed our concerns. After that, we decided not to clean the women's room until the events were over and the building was empty, which infuriated Fabi, resulting in the daytime crew having to do cleanup. I want to note that other than Fabi, we had a good relationship with everyone else on the daytime crew. They understood that we didn't feel comfortable in the women's restroom during events. They also did not like Fabi because she never cleaned. She would just watch them do it. Tensions with Fabi escalated over other issues. Jared, who was disabled and had been a cleaner longer than I had, earned less. When he spoke up, Fabi justified the pay disparity by pointing to my longer tenure at the resort. HR sided with her, and she began to openly resent us. Any minor mistake we made was met with her yelling at us in front of the department during meetings. When I tried to get my brother a job, Fabi called it nepotism and rejected him, yet she hired her own son, who was gay. Behind closed doors, she expressed to the day shift hopes that her son would change, which suggested to some of us that she might have tried abusive ways to alter his orientation. Fabi couldn't fire us. Jared and I were the only ones willing to cover night shifts and events, and her boss liked me, though not Jared as much. When Jared took time off after a family bereavement, they used it as an excuse to let him go. I later found out that he told Fabi about the death. She in turn, did not pass that info along to her supervisors. It was tough with Jared no longer working there, so I began mingling more with the day staff. That's when I discovered Fabi's darker side. She was stalking her ex both online and in person, even enlisting staff to help her after she was blocked. Armed with the knowledge of her superstitious nature, I decided to play a bit of petty psychological warfare. I started setting our storage closet's numeric lock to 0666 and had friends in other departments do the same when I was off. One day, after typing 666 into the work computer's username field, Fabi accused someone of hacking and refused to use it for days. When she began rummaging through office trash for scraps of information about my activities, I escalated my tactics. I drew occult symbols and scribbled faux satanic chants on papers with my left non-dominant hand, deliberately discarding them in the trash where she would find them if rummaging. It worked. Fabi grew visibly unnerved and would follow me around. My only way of losing her was entering the men's restroom. Yes, she patronized us about not going into the women's restroom, but she herself wouldn't enter the men's. To avoid her, I adjusted my hours so that we'd only cross paths briefly. My grandma passed away during this time, so I took a few weeks off of work. When I got back, Fabi was gone. I later learned that she had made an employee perform a dangerous task which resulted in a near-serious injury, leading to her dismissal or resignation. Although I do like to think I might have played some part in her decline. My time at the ski resort may have been challenging, but I like to believe that I stood up for what was right, and ultimately, I managed to outlast the toxic manager, Fabi. Sometimes, it's essential to navigate through difficult situations, knowing that doing the right thing can lead to a positive outcome.
I've been with my girlfriend for well over a year now, and in our earliest days of getting to know each other, she expressed a desire to introduce me to her friend, Sandy, a pseudonym. To my initial confusion, things took an unexpected turn. From day one, Sandy and her friend made it abundantly clear that they didn't like me. It was a baffling and disheartening experience, to say the least. But I remained hopeful that things might change. As time passed, the situation didn't improve. The mutual resentment between us only deepened, and it became evident that they had no intentions of getting to know me better. They also took it upon themselves to gossip and spread unkind rumors about me. One particular point of contention was my ethnicity. I'm Mexican-American, and Sandy hails from Mexico. It's a sad but familiar truth that within some Mexican communities, there's a tendency to label Mexican-Americans as white or not truly Mexican, often for trivial and spiteful reasons. I had faced this bias before, but it took on a different and more hurtful dimension when it was coming from someone who had once been close to my girlfriend. This brings us to the present day. In my drawing class, we embarked on our second project, centered around the theme of series. For this assignment, I decided to create a series of drawings depicting my life, with the first piece dedicated to my experiences as a Mexican-American dealing with the prejudice I mentioned earlier. In this artwork, I included direct quotes from Sandy because, to my surprise, we were in the same class. During the presentation, I made a conscious decision to read Sandy's quotes out loud for the entire class to hear. I opted not to use specific names, instead referring to other Mexicans. My intention was to foster reflection and understanding, rather than merely outing those who had wronged me. During the feedback session, one of my classmates bravely opened up about how she could empathize with my experiences, as she had faced similar challenges. She expressed gratitude for my presentation, highlighting how it made her feel less alone in her struggles. The moment left a profound impact on me, reinforcing the importance of sharing our stories. What astounded me was that, out of all the presentations throughout the 2-hour session, the professor chose to single out Sandy and ask for their thoughts. My jaw nearly hit the floor, considering no one else had been singled out. Sandy's response was hesitant agreement with the previous speaker, followed by silence. While I can't be certain that my presentation caused a significant change in Sandy's perspective, I hold on to the hope that, at the very least, it may encourage them to reconsider their actions. The experience has taught me the power of speaking out and sharing our struggles, ultimately fostering understanding and unity. It was a small victory, but it might just be the catalyst for ending the rumors and the toxic discussions about me behind my back with my girlfriend.
Years ago, when my days were plagued by a never-ending barrage of scam calls, I hatched a plan to turn the tables on the persistent scammers. These weren't just any spam calls, they were relentless solicitations about Medicare and final expense whole life insurance. These insidious pests invaded my phone daily, and when open enrollment season came around, they even dared to call me on sacred Sundays. Blocking numbers, declining calls, and pretending to be utterly uninsured made no difference. It was time to fight back, and so I decided to waste their time. One fateful week, I reached my breaking point. They had taken their audacity to new heights, even calling me from a fresh number the very instant I rejected their previous attempt. They were like the herpes of the telecommunications world, relentless and impossible to shake off. Fueled by frustration, I made a decision. I declared that for every scam Medicare call I received that day, I would inquire about a deeply personal subject in the most infantile manner, grossing out these shady scammers. Most of the crooks couldn't terminate the call fast enough when I hit them with my peculiar line of questioning. But one encounter, in particular, turned out to be an absolute gem. With a mischievous twinkle in my eye and an old British man accent at the ready, I embarked on this unique conversation. After the scammer dutifully recited their spiel, I adopted the voice of an elderly British gentleman and asked, "May I pose a question?" His response was a curious yes. So, in the gentle, quivering tone of my character, I inquired, "Did you make poopies today?" Silence hung in the air for what felt like an eternity. The scammer was utterly flabbergasted, as if he had just encountered an alien language. Finally, he managed to stammer, did I do what?" It was as if he had never, in his scamming career, encountered such a bizarre question. Undeterred, I repeated my inquiry, "Did you make poopies today?" His response was a visceral, disgusted "Nah, man," before abruptly disconnecting the call. The bizarre question had done the trick. I had left a scammer at a loss for words. And, curiously enough, the barrage of calls dwindled that night. They still dared to bother me occasionally, but my eccentric questions had made them think twice. It was a peculiar form of revenge against the tormentors who had hounded me, one weird question at a time.
Last Monday, my husband and I embarked on a seemingly ordinary grocery shopping expedition to Walmart. With a nearly full cart of groceries, we approached the checkout line, feeling accomplished as we checked off items from our list. However, our shopping adventure took an unexpected turn when my husband noticed something peculiar about the rice bags we'd selected. Intrigued by the packaging, he peered inside one of the rice bags and was taken aback by the sight of tiny bugs crawling within. Concerned about the quality of the product, he diligently examined the neighboring bags, only to find them similarly infested. It seemed as if the entire stock of great value rice, as well as another budget-friendly brand, was harboring these unwelcome critters. Disappointed, we decided to opt for a more expensive brand, hoping it would spare us any crunchy surprises. Waiting in the checkout line, our patience was tested by the man in front of us. He was buying an excessive number of the same products, including an astonishing 10 bags of rice. As we patiently waited for him to complete his transaction, my husband noticed that one of the man's items had inched its way onto our side of the conveyor belt. In an attempt to help, my husband gently moved the item back to the man's side. Little did we know, this small act of goodwill would set off a chain of events that would leave an impression. The man, evidently irked by this seemingly harmless act, shot us a hostile glare. Oblivious to his animosity, I continued with the checkout process as though nothing had happened. After paying for our groceries, we began packing them into our backpacks, as our apartment building lacked parking spaces. It was then that I innocently inquired about the man's peculiar grocery choices. My husband shared the unexpected revelation that the rice bags he'd been purchasing were similarly infested, the same issue we'd encountered earlier. He also revealed that he had intended to inform the man about the rice dilemma before he paid but refrained from doing so due to the unfriendly glare. My response: "Serves him well, 10 bags of Rice Krispies with extra protein." As we walked away from the store, we couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of the situation. It appeared that our simple, well-intentioned act had inadvertently irritated the rice enthusiast. We departed, amused by the irony that he had ended up with bug-infested rice in his cart, much to our silent satisfaction. Around 3 decades ago, my friend embarked on an adventurous journey that would forever be etched into the annals of his memory. He found himself traveling through a rather unsanitary place, far from the comforts of home, where culinary choices could lead to unexpected consequences. While navigating this unfamiliar territory, he indulged in a local delicacy that promised a unique experience for his palate. Little did he know that this gastronomic adventure would soon turn into a nightmare. The unsettling sensations began to churn within him, and it became clear that his stomach had rebelled against the unusual fare. However, my friend's plight was further compounded by the tight schedule he had to follow. He was scheduled to catch a bus that would transport him from the small, rustic town where he found himself to a somewhat larger town. This larger town would be his gateway to the bus that would ultimately carry him back home. Missing this connection would not only strand him but also entail the purchase of another ticket. As he stood by, awaiting the arrival of the bus, he could feel the urgency in his belly intensifying. The minutes ticked by, and just when the situation appeared to reach a critical point, the bus made its tardy appearance. In this part of the world, bus schedules were more vague suggestions than strict commitments, and so the minor delay didn't appear too distressing. Eager to board the bus and make it to his next stop, he quickly settled his fare with the driver. However, fate had different plans. His stomach rebelled vehemently once again, causing a wave of nausea to wash over him. Desperation set in, and he found himself in a dire predicament. He couldn't simply wait for his impending doom, he needed immediate relief. Summoning his courage, he approached the bus driver and explained his plight. He asked, even pleaded, for the driver to grant him a few moments to answer nature's call. Unfortunately, his appeal fell on deaf ears. The bus driver, unrelenting and perhaps unaware of the gravity of the situation, callously refused. My friend found himself in a heart-wrenching dilemma. Missing this bus meant missing the connection back home, incurring additional costs, and prolonging his discomfort. There was no choice but to brave the journey while wrestling with the impending catastrophe within. The rickety bus embarked on its rough voyage over ungraded sand roads, bouncing and swaying as it forged its path. My friend tried valiantly to suppress the mounting pressure, determined to make it to his destination without any untoward incidents. However, the unforgiving terrain and the unrelenting motion of the bus worked against him. It was a battle he couldn't win. The time came when he could resist no longer. The urgency reached its zenith, and he could no longer contain the explosive force that brewed within him. Desperation took over as he grappled with his pants, fearfully contemplating the consequences of his actions. In a daring move born out of sheer necessity, he decided to improvise. His only option, in the absence of a proper restroom, was to open the window and, with a heavy heart, perch himself on the window ledge. The vast, unforgiving landscape whizzed by beneath him as he released the pent-up fury of his inner kraken. As the ordeal unfolded, the bus continued its arduous journey through the barren terrain. When it finally arrived at its destination, the driver was met with an unexpected sight. A pungent, sand-covered plume of evidence, one that required his immediate attention, marred the side of the bus. With a resigned sigh, he had to tackle the arduous task of cleaning the unsavory mess left behind by a passenger who had faced a choice between convenience and calamity. Perhaps, in hindsight, it might have been more prudent to heed my friend's plea and allow him to take care of his pressing needs before embarking on the journey.